Chapter 6. Mother. Alouette fell to her knees by the immobile pile of armor. The brand-new boots toppled from her arms onto the ground. She told him everything, as she had no memories past waking up bedbound in the doll witch's house a year ago, why she escaped, and that she couldn't get far on her own, how scared and lonely she was. A cool breeze blew through the night, rustling the white bellflowers in the valley grave. No response came. Alouette slumped, ashamed of her helplessness. Perhaps he had already gone to the soul constellation, like Euclid. Maybe he didn't care. Clutching at her skirt, her eyes welled with tears. She already wanted to summon Euclid, but that would be too pathetic. He would just berate her desperation, tug her cheek, and return to the stars. Wiping her eyes against a sleeve, she smiled through a sob at the thought. An unfamiliar voice interrupted the night. "So, you're the doll witch. Get up. We're here for your dominion." Alouette no longer had the will to stand or deny anything. Doing the bare minimum of glancing over her shoulder, a younger girl dressed in a puffy purple dress came into view. On her wide-brimmed hat sat puppets and dolls between oversized bows. Although she spoke like an irritable teenager, she was not human. The flowery polish and lines of symmetry running across her face and joints attested as such. The snow-white bear from before walked behind the challenger. All parts of it were colorless. The fur, claws, nose, and eyes, even its blood ran lucid. Such was the course of every living thing that became a familiar of the Justice Witch. It had come to oversee the duel. Challengers had the right to demand them, and it was the Dominion holders' responsibility to defend their title or surrender it. "You can have it," Alouette muttered, staring at the hem of her skirt. "I want you to take this hand off of me." The challenger's eye twitched. The doll dominion belonged to someone this feeble and apathetic? It was blasphemous, unheard of, for a dominion holder to act in such a way. Wood clattered with every menacing step the puppet took closer to grant her wish. Clack, 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 came a gravely familiar noise. It sounded like the workshop, the cabinet in the darkness, the real doll witch outstretching bone-white fingers for her to accept, her own joints. Alouette was sick of it all. It would be easier to accept whatever was about to happen. Maybe that would sever the knot of witchcraft entangling her. It indeed was the end. To the first act. A sharp breeze flew through the valley, snapping her eyes open. Petals darted into the air and met her tears before they fell into the soil. She gasped and saw that the armor, boots and all, had disappeared. He had left her sight in order to join her side. Alouette turned to see his back standing tall and ready, his frayed scarf casting a protective shadow over her. He glanced in reassurance before facing forward. Alouette's heart swelled as she wondered more than ever what his name was. The challenger crossed her arms. "Mother, we've got this." The white bear grunted and walked to the middle of the field, but not between them. Making a dog-like whine, it conveyed that it was ready to referee. They just needed to decide the terms of the duel. Alouette tugged on the suit of armor's belt. "You don't have to fight for me. I'll give up." He knew how she felt. Minutes ago, she cried on his grave about how she wasn't the real doll witch, but considering the weight of dominions, there had to be a reason why Doll left it with her. He looked side to side before stooping to pluck blades of grass. First, pointing at himself, he spelled something letter by letter. "G," Alouette sounded out as he laid the grass in the dirt. "U." He waited for her to discern the letters in the darkness, nodding with each one before continuing. Y-O-T. Guio. His treasured name, given to him by a cherished person. The girl's face filled with confusion, surprise, and joy. "I'm Alouette," she repeated. "Is Guio your name? Am I saying it right?" He nodded and bowed before taking hold of Doll's hand. Balling up the wooden fingers, he placed it into the palm of Alouette's. No matter how unwanted, the doll witch was having her borrow this irreplaceable asset. The decent thing to do would be to take care of it until the time to face him came again. She nodded back, trusting in Guio, and ever so slightly, the doll witch. "Hurry up," the challenger jeered. Taking a deliberate moment before reacting, Guio rose. Plenty of duels proceeded as displays of knowledge and skill instead of brawls. But as Alouette lacked the former, combat was their only option. "Does a fight to the death sound good to you?" Alouette looked horrified. "Of course not. Maiming? No!" The challenger stomped about. "Oh, come on. It's not like people usually die during duels." "Then what's the point?" "So you can go all out and see who's the best, duh." Still, no." She stomped some more. It sounded like someone dropped an armful of wooden tiles. "How is Doll such a wimp? I should kill you now." Hearing that, the bear growled and gnashed its teeth in her direction. She shrank and mumbled that it was a joke. The justice witches throughout history took it upon themselves to give structure to witch domina, deeming unwarranted violence a grave offense. It was a different story if both parties decided to wager their lives. How would they decide the victor, then? Alouette suggested the goal of the duel to be claiming a doll limb from the other. It'd be a safe option while being more difficult to steal. The challenger opened her mouth to protest, but froze and stared straight ahead, tuning in to someone with the utmost care. Once she regained focus, she stuck out a wooden tongue and agreed to the terms. Guio pointed at his gauntlets and boots, offering to be the target. Alouette finally smiled. Her first impression of him had been right. "No way. I and the dolls made that for you." Bashfully rubbing where his neck would be, he stood at the ready. The challenger clicked her tongue. "Hello? Where's your weapon?" Guio shrugged, declining to pick up the rusted one scattered along the valley. From the side, the bear grunted to draw their attention. No killing, no major injuries. The use of anti-witch weaponry is illegal. Violations will nullify the results. Offenders may be gathered and prosecuted in the Pearl capital. Victory goes to whomever claims the other's doll limb first. The prize is the doll dominion. "Wait," Alouette said. "What if I win?" "Aw, you noticed. I thought you were going to do it for free." Alouette gave the challenger a dirty look and wondered if she should make her grovel as her prize. Dominion-holding witches couldn't refuse duels, but postponing them and negotiating rewards was within their rights. What should it be? To survive in the outside world, resources came first, but currency may have fluctuated after a war. "I want," Alouette mulled, "enough witch dominion currency that can last to... Did Guio need to eat? Well, 2 adults. Living an upper-middle-class lifestyle. In the Pearl capital? For 1 year, including groceries, rent, and utilities." The challenger's mouth hung agape while Guio whipped around, his chin guard dangling. "Who do you think you are?" "Hey," Alouette snapped, acting for her life. "I'm the doll Her breath cut off. She tried to gasp, yell, but the words wouldn't come. It was the strangest thing. "Wielder, the Dominions. So, make it worth our time." The challenger across the field raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? This won't even be a death match. 1 season." 3? 1.5, and that's it." The Justice Familiar huffed. Dahl was a competitive, lauded Dominion. Rewards were a way to respect the holder's time and deter swarms of challengers. At the same time, advancement would halt if the bar was unreasonable. The bear made the call. 2 seasons, as it was well within the opposition's means. "I accept," Alouette announced. She and Guillot flashed each other a thumbs up as the puppet girl's teeth ground. An amused, elegant woman's voice resounded throughout the valley. "We graciously accept. Have fun, Synth." Alouette and Guillot had no time to wonder who it was. With a roar, the duel began. Synth grinned and raised both arms above her head, the joints shining in rings of purple underneath her lace gloves. Wooden hands emerged from the ground at Alouette's feet and clutched her ankles, giving Guillot pause just as he was about to dash ahead. "I'm okay. Focus on her." Alouette tried to be brave. It would be fine. She had been through worse. This was nothing. The girl raised her left hand and whispered, "Please, help us." Her wish was his command. Scarlet wires looped around the puppet hands and dragged them out of the ground. However, it didn't stop at digging up disembodied hands or even mannequins. The upheaval revealed sectioned, snake-like arms 3 times Alouette's height. "You fell for it," Synth summoned purple strings, manipulating the arms from afar as they clacked into a domed cage around Alouette. 10 bars curled closer like a pair of hands about to play with a toy. The doll witch's hand spurred into action, raising Alouette's arm and uncoiling her fingers. A band of red wires spiraled outward, hooking around the serpent's wrists, threading and looping until they became bound to each other. Sudden movements by one strangled the rest. His red wires spun, haunting, mesmerizing, and mathematical, like the pattern of a seashell. Horrific amazement stunned Alouette until she remembered that this was just as much her fight. Taking a deep breath, she clenched the doll hand into a fist as the serpents writhed for freedom in a paralyzing tug-of-war. Alouette plunged to the ground, using their combined weight to close her fingers. Razor-sharp, the red wires cleaved through all 10 arms, rendering them splintered wood. The doll witch plotted his counterattack. Red streaks darted across the field past Guillot and around Synth. She gasped and released a barrier-like grate of her strings in time to block the assault. The 2-toned wires pulled at each other in all directions, screeching and shooting sparks. At every angle, both strings snapped. Their wake left a blinking, fading gleam. One red thread floated like a stray spiderweb before zipping past Synth's face. Several strands of her prized hair fell as a warning. As a fit ensued on the other side, Alouette looked down at the Dominion mark in awe. It felt like someone was holding a hand over hers, guiding it to paint a masterpiece. She snapped back to attention. "We have to immobilize her hands, specifically her fingers." Guillot signaled with a wave as he continued running, kicking up grass and petals as he weaved and skidded through Synth's strings. Fuming, she crossed her outstretched arms before pulling them away parallel to the ground. Purple strings stretched into a cat's cradle shape, firing a laser-like net at him. Without losing speed, Guillot placed a thoughtful gauntlet on his chin. As the grid came close enough to cut a normal man into pieces, the same hand tossed his helmet up and over. All the other pieces of armor disassembled mid-sprint, sliding through the gaps and defying gravity. The outermost layers of the bulky hip guards and breastplate shredded white-hot across the strings before reuniting on the other end. He emerged unscathed, besides a bit more fraying on his scarf. "Ugh! How can a hunk of metal move that well?" Synth growled, retracting her strings. Guillot was closing the distance, and it looked like the advantage was with him and Alouette. But then she giggled. Strands of thread rained down on the valley, enough to illuminate the land purple. Lighting up and hanging high without the end of the line in sight, the threads mimicked a connection to the Soul constellation. Old, heavy strips of cloth and rusted weapons shuffled and clanged as they rose from the ground. Dull strings attempted to cut through them, making contact for a split second before phasing through. Alouette gasped as a cyclone erupted. Synth's wires soared across the valley, crisscrossing, looping, and searching for the pieces to their puzzles. Held together by a twister, the flurry of swords, spears, and chipped armor assured devastation in the eye of its storm. The doll witch's strings snagged and redirected projectiles that came Alouette's way, but even he would be able to do only so much with one hand. Alouette exchanged looks with Guillot, who had turned to her in concern. "Take me to him." A thick red wire crossed the field and looped around Guillot's gauntlet. Grabbing hold of it, he pulled Alouette close and deflected the incoming blades. Synth grinned. "Hey, is that suit of armor from here? Great. You can play with your old friends again." The wind died, and all debris halted mid-trajectory before lowering to the ground. From the pieces rose a dozen reanimated human soldiers and witches. These headless, empty dolls lacked most of their limbs. Floating armors and weapons compensated the rest, stitched together by pulsating threads. Guillot's fist clenched, but not because he was averse to fighting his old comrades. His feelings about them and the war ran more complex than that. Focusing ahead, Guillot stepped in front of Alouette. She held her hand over dolls. It was the reason why he hadn't acted yet. The patchwork construction of these enemies implied that they would reassemble and fight endlessly. Sure enough, Doll could defeat these soldiers. For Alouette's sake, he would tear the Forsaken deceased into absolute shreds, until their very concept came to an end. That would undo Synth's witchcraft. All Alouette had to do was lift her hand, leave the dirty work to the true doll witch. But she remembered what Euclid said. She had an affinity with death. Now was a chance to answer one of her countless questions. Alouette tiptoed beside Guillot and faced the corpses. She didn't know what to say until a reminder floated into her head. Witches are simpler than they seem. You don't need a spell or incantation, but for your own sake, mean every word you speak. "Stand down, please. You shouldn't be fighting anymore." The girl's voice shook. She couldn't hear herself over the anxiety-induced ringing in her ears. Even if it worked, it would confirm that she was a death witch. What were the implications? What would come after that? Wondering if even trying was a huge mistake, she gripped the doll hand. The wooden fingers held her trembling one's back. A cool gauntlet rested on her shoulder. Keeping her eyes on the corpses, Alouette made an effort to calm herself. She wanted to reassure Guillot in the same way he had rescued her. You all have to go back to sleep. Except... Alouette looked up at her new partner. I hope you can come with me, even though it's because I'm pathetic and too scared on my own. Having already decided, Guillot nodded. The pair turned to see the soldiers standing still despite Synth barking orders for them to attack. "They're the deceased, not your dolls," Alouette snapped. Her words were the truth. The soldiers jolted in place as Synth's wires disappeared. Ignoring everything else, the world a war later, each other, and especially this duel, they slunk back to their graves. It worked. Euclid was right. Alouette's shoulders dropped. Guyot had only an inkling of how much his presence meant to her at this moment. Ugh, whatever. The fight was just for fun. I had this in the bag all along. Getting over her frustration as quickly as the seasons transitioned, Synth turned her nose up. You're dumb. So dumb. I can't believe you said it out in the open earlier, and still haven't realized. A chill crawled down Alouette's spine. It could only be one thing. Cry, beg for mercy, become one of Mother's dolls and hand over the doll dominion yourself, Synth chanted. Alouette! No one moved. Alouette didn't feel any different. She opened and closed her fists and tapped her heel on the ground. But it seemed normal. Nothing had happened. She and Guyot exchanged looks. Even the bear, who had watched the heated duel with a blank face, whined in confusion. Synth, the most baffled of all, knocked her knees as her jaw hung with a loose screw. The peace-loving, kind-hearted Guyot saw his chance and charged at her, drawing his right gauntlet to his breastplate and rotating the closed fist clockwise. Signing sorry, an apology more for his own sake than hers, he threw Synth to the ground, clamping her fingers shut. In unison, red wires wrapped around her knee and threatened to rip it off. Could you surrender? Alouette asked. Fake! Fake! You're a phony! Synth wriggled, raring to fight. Doll tightened the strings, and Alouette didn't stop him. Enough, an elegant woman's voice ordered. We are outclassed. The fact that you do not realize this is a reflection of my ineptitude. The familiar name Synth stopped in her tracks, gritting her teeth. But Mother! You've worked forever to be the doll witch. It's not fair. There was no one else in sight, Alouette thought, before making eye contact with the puppet on Synth's hat. It remained immobile and expressionless, but somehow seemed amused. You're a phony too, Alouette muttered at Synth. If Synth had skin, her face would have flushed red. Mother surrendered with amicable grace. A wave of white light swept the field, approving the results. Rewards would be procured within 72 hours unless agreed upon otherwise. The bear grumbled and lay down to nap. How do you do? You may call me Mother, the proxy puppet greeted, giggling when Guyot and Alouette kept their guards up. I would never claim a dominion outside a legal duel. Justices are too troublesome to deal with if you catch their attention. Mother wasn't her real name. It was what witches called a surface name, which they could share freely. However, there were two caveats. One, these names had to be intimately connected to the individual. Using a surface name increased the likelihood of others unveiling your identity. Ultimately, these were nicknames that had to be conveyed in a roundabout fashion. Two, it was impossible to say, my name is so-and-so, or I'm so-and-so, as Alouette did to Guyot. This privilege of existence belonged to true names and dominion titles. I don't know. I'm not even a witch, Alouette admitted before pausing. There was something she wanted to know sooner or later. She spoke in a quiet voice, testing to see if the words would come out. But I'm a death witch. Somehow, both statements were correct. How curious, Mother mused. Not a human, but not quite a witch. And then we have a suit of armor who is certainly dead, but still alive. The reminder prompted Synth to stick her tongue out at Guyot, who signed another futile sorry. Oh, the poor thing can't speak. Synth, be a dear and give them a pen and paper. What? You mean, like, to keep? Well, yes. Will they otherwise procure materials from the forest like prehistoric men? I don't have any. Nonsense. What about your scrapbook? But that's mine! Mother's puppet rattled. Synth yelped and dug out a pink flowery notebook from under her hat. Pouting, she handed Guillot a page torn from the back and her least favorite pen. The girl in the suit of armor finally had a way to communicate. Alouette twiddled her fingers as Guillot tapped the pen on his chin guard in thought and began to write. The first message was short compared to how long he spent ruminating. Alouette read the neat handwriting with fluttering high hopes. "Hi, Alouette. Am I spelling your name right? Thanks for the belts and boots." Synth cocked an eyebrow as Mother chuckled. Guillot had drawn the exclamation marks last, worried that periods would sound too serious. "Yeah, probably anyway," she replied. "And you're welcome. The dolls did most of the work." Not knowing what to do or say next, the shy pair fidgeted. Synth almost interrupted them, but cowered when Mother's puppet let out another stern rattle. "Are you sure about coming with me? I don't know where I'm going or what to do." Guillot had to inch the paper under Alouette's nose as she was preoccupied with facing the remarkably interesting ground. "We'll figure it out together, if you'll have me." Alouette smiled as Doll wiped at her eyes. After some scribbling, Guillot handed over the paper again and drooped in shame. "I'm sorry that I didn't answer you sooner." "It's okay. From your point of view, I was some weird witch walking in a graveyard." His pauldrons jumped. That reminded him. She peeked over, excited to see what he was writing so furiously. Her face turned sour within seconds. It was an essay about how she was too trusting in the first place. What if he was a bad person? He could have robbed and kidnapped her, or been an undead, or cursed, or both, and... Alouette stayed his hand. I get it. Guillot gave her a look that said she, in fact, did not. "I'd like to think I'm a good judge of character." Euclid was not mentioned for convenience's sake. Mother allowed them to share the moment a bit longer. "How sweet. Possibly you'll find a prince or princess like that one day." "Gross!" Right now, the doll witch was only a hand, but evermore an indomitable, undeniable genius. If Mother used everything at her disposal, there was a 50-50 chance she could claim the Dominion. "Let's see," Mother mused as Guillot continued to write his grievances up in the air where Alouette couldn't reach. "Suit of armor, how old were you at the time of death?" Synth shooed away Alouette, who complied with a squint. Guillot made a 2 and then a 7 with his hands. "How terribly young. What of your parents?" Guillot took extra care to write a neat response. At times, he would pause before continuing, simplifying his story while preserving its weight. After several minutes of writing, he showed Mother the letter. She spent just as much time scrutinizing the words. Eventually, she raised a hand, satisfied. "I will let you go." However, the puppet on the hat fell limp. Emerging from the nondescript proxy's figure was a shadow that stretched many times more than its size. Blotting out what scant light remained, the darkness melded into a noblewoman with a luxurious feathered hat, streams of pearls, and ribbons decorating a voluptuous wire petticoat. A ruffled fan crossed her collar and rested against her shoulder. "If there is a single lie in what you have told me," the shadow spoke, lips pursed in amusement, "I will make you one of my dolls. You shall wish you were never born." "I would never lie about my mother. Thank you for sparing us, madam. You are a terribly fearsome witch, and I mean this in the most flattering way possible." Watching the exchange with bated breath, Alouette sighed in relief upon seeing Mother chuckle and Guillot bow. Mother then spoke in a quieter, private voice. "Dearest Knight, are you confident you can stand by that girl, no matter what she is?" Guillaume looked over at Alouette, who glanced around, wondering what they were talking about now. His hand remained steady. "I'm no knight, and we're acquaintances, and soon-to-be companions, by chance. If she's the person she's shown me so far, I'll gladly stay." The shadow's features softened. "Very well, but do visit your mother sometime before your journey ends." Guillaume gripped the left side of his breastplate and nodded. He tucked the paper into a gauntlet as Mother beckoned Alouette back. Synth jabbed the back of her knees, forcing her into an animated curtsy. Alouette would have shoved the smaller girl into the dirt if Mother hadn't begun talking. "Miss Alouette, may you regain your identity," she said, referring to Guillaume's letter. "Perhaps your mother awaits your safe return as well." "As well?" Looking over, Alouette realized Guillaume's thoughts had caught him, like when they first met. "But if not, I would be obliged to fill the role. Space is limitless for children in my residence and my heart, as long as they become my dolls." Mother ignored Synth's jealous whining. Her shadow performed a proper curtsy, while Synth stuck her tongue out again for good measure. "Farewell, suit of armor and little death witch," she cooed. "Oh, and how could I forget? The doll witch as well." Tittering ran through the valley as the pair disappeared in a ballooning void. Starlight found its way back to the ground. Once they were gone, something curious happened. Two lively voices similar to, but not quite like the witch and her familiar, could be heard. They echoed, like the long-forgotten, sweetest part of a dream. "Mom, you still haven't praised me for the fight!" "Oh dear, you're right. I do say it was a spectacular show, honey. I am so fortunate to have a daughter like you." The sound of clacking wood ceased, replaced by an impossibly specific one. It wasn't a coincidence that Alouette and Guillaume pictured the same thing. Fabric against a child's cheek as she walked, clinging to the simple, breeze-tussled skirt of her mother's dress.